We're going to be starting this episode off a little bit differently than normal episodes because there is world historical change happening right now. Don't worry, this is going to be a normal episode. We will have fun, but I also wanted to get out some thoughts that I had written down about the current situation. So last night, Friday, October 27, I attended a spontaneous protest at Grand Central Terminal to demand an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, and I would like to tell you about what I saw. If you've ever gone to a spontaneous direct action, you know how the police behave in these environments. Gone is the smiling, cheerful presence of events like the Women's March and Corporate Pride. You know, a collection of friendly neighborhood officers that just want to be part of the community, caring for you. Yes, you. Instead, we were met with a steely-eyed militarized force, a wall of blue, staring us down with a mixture of haughty anger and dead-eyed disdain. A large group of protesters had massed quickly and marched to the main concourse of the terminal, but by the time I got there, the blue line had blocked entry through all public points of ingress, and I found myself massed with hundreds of protesters just inside the Park Avenue entrance. Chants of ceasefire now and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, rang through the halls, protesters pushing up against NYPD officers who shoved back. Commuters coming up from the subway tried to make their way through with limited success. Some of them were bemused, some of them were angry. None of them were going to catch their trains. The NYPD and MTA made the joint decision to shut the station down completely. I tried to find another entrance and make it down the concourse to see how this would all play out. I found one entrance that was unrestricted and descended the escalator to the concourse floor. Stepping off under the famous blue-green constellation ceiling, I was immediately enveloped in a wall of sound. On the ornate staircase leading up to the Apple Store, as well as on top of the ticket windows next to the massive departure and arrival boards, Jewish Voice for Peace protesters had mobilized with massive banners. Never again for anyone. Palestinians should be free. Mourn the dead and fight like hell for the living. Hundreds sat on the floor of the concourse wearing matching black t-shirts with white printed text. On the front, not in our name. On the back, Jews say ceasefire now. More chants, more singing. NYPD brass stood on the balconies overlooking the concourse alongside U.S. Army soldiers in full fatigues carrying M4 carbines, while down on the floor a line of approximately 24 NYPD Strategic Response Group officers stood ringing the protesters, zip ties strapped to their belts, ready to begin cuffing and arresting. An organizer wearing a high-visibility vest warned me that by staying in the area, I was risking arrest. I stepped to the other side of the police line and began recording video on my phone. And the arrests began. There's something very strange about watching a completely peaceful group of people getting cuffed with zip ties, detained, and taken into custody. There was no crying, no histrionics, no resistance. Simply the full force of the state being brought to bear sharply and immediately on a restive populace. The arrested protesters were escorted to the Lexington Avenue 43rd Street tunnel, where they were lined up single file. Outside the terminal at the police staging point on Lexington Avenue, 100 or so bystanders looked on as arrestees from inside the terminal were boarded onto corrections buses and a dual-segment M103 bus that the police had commandeered for detainee transport. Around 9 p.m., 3 hours after the beginning of the protest, Grand Central Terminal reopened to pedestrian traffic. Halloween revelers and tourists began flowing through the concourse, and other than the increased military and police presence, there was no sign that anything had happened. Just another Friday night in New York City. 3 hours later, the sun rose on Gaza, revealing entire city blocks flattened by Israeli airstrikes. IDF troops on the ground crossed into the Gaza border, and as of when I'm recording this, are still there. And by the time you're listening to this, Israeli tanks will likely have entered Gaza City, ushering in a new era of occupation and asymmetric warfare made possible by American and British arms. I don't have a neat conclusion for this, except to say, get out in the streets. You can be a passive observer of genocide, or you can fight. If you listen to this show, you probably have some investment in the death of empire. And this is your chance to help kill it. Look up protests in your area, get organized, and help bring about a better future. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show.
So many possible worlds. right. Well, as you could hear from the beginning, this is going to be slightly a different episode, but
it's time for a jarring tone shift.
We're not going to be staying on the subject of current events.
No.
Mostly because this is a very busy week for all of us. I'm the worst of all possible Brians. Hello.
I'm the worst of all possible Joshes, and this is the worst of all possible worlds, the first and only podcast to open with a jarring tone shift, I guess.
AJ is not with us. He is being cradled in his mother's and father's arms, being sung gently to sleep because he is afraid of the many nightmares that come to him from the internet. And no, I don't mean current events. I mean the thing that we are going to talk about today, Marble Hornets. The Slender Man found footage web series that I watched all through college, along with some of my good friends, including our guest today, Ann Huston.
Hello.
Hello, Ann.
I did watch that with you, and I am your friend.
Thank you for being a friend.
This is just going to be an episode where the three of us reminisce about college.
Yeah,
mostly.
Get ready.
Wait, hold on. There's going to be some reminiscing about high school for me, too, because of my proclivity to hang around abandoned buildings
Very good,
when I
very
was a
good.
teenager.
Absolutely.
But this is going to be a little bit different. We're just going to, it's maybe a little bit more of a fancy movie time, except this is not a movie, nor is it fancy.
No.
It's not really even time if you think about it.
I'm thinking about it.
Okay, did you get it yet?
No.
Oh, I think I fucked this one up.
Hey, it's first time for everything.
Something about the internet really inspires people to make interesting fake things that are by their nature participatory. One of the very first things that started happening on the old internet, on the BBS, on the BBWs, the web forums for big beautiful women.
The bulletin board women.
Yeah. This is on stuff like Usenet and FidoNet. There was something called Ong's Hat, which was...
Ong? Like Ong Lee?
No, O-N-G. It's actually an
Okay.
English name. It's a very unusual English name, Ong and Spong and such things. But there's an old ghost town in New Jersey called Ong's Hat. And so these guys who were working on...
colder out here than an Ong's hat.
Really good.
Let's see how hard we can degrade this bit.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, how much can we make unusable?
Oh, it's staying in. I'm not editing shit this week. I'm not doing any fucking work because I'm also closing the escape room and I'm very sad. So Ong's Hat is this ghost town in New Jersey. And there were these guys on these web forums on Xerox zines. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that was going on in the 80s that I don't quite understand. But on these BBS forums, etc., people were making up these stories. They were finding these like secret government documents about Princeton scientists who have discovered interdimensional travel.
Oh, hell yeah.
Somehow located at this like nexus that is the ghost town of Ong's Hat. And this is a big, people believed in it. Some of the people who got involved in the project started making it a little too participatory. There were people who were just like fucking bothered in their homes for like decades afterwards of people looking for Ong's Hat related clues. Like this kind of ruined some people's lives. I'm going to link a great article about it in the description.
Does this place still exist? Like, could I go to Ong's
the ghost town of Ong's Hat? You can still go to it. Yeah,
we could go.
We could go on a road trip.
Is there any merch? There, perhaps a hat.
Does the ghost?
Is there a branded
The titular hat? I would like to wear the titular hat.
Well, no one would do that because then that would be putting a hat on Ong's Hat. Hey-o!
So this is like the late 80s.
Late 80s, early 90s, into the 2000s.
Okay.
I feel like this is even partly related to like the John Tidor stuff, who was this guy who like showed up on, I feel like it was Godlike Productions or one of those other message boards where he was like, I'm from the future. Oh. Here's the things that are going to happen in the far off future of 2020.
Well, and Brian, I know how much you love like a weird conspiracy guy.
I do love a weird conspiracy. Less over the years,
right.
But that used to be my shit, was like looking at conspiracy theories and how they spread. Like I know about very strange conspiracy theories that never really took off, like there are no nukes. Which had a small revival in 2022, but I was on the ground floor of that in like 2008. There was a brand new forum that lasted about 6 months for a bunch of people who were like, one day it was New Year's. I remember it was New Year's and I went to Times Square and I saw the ball drop. And when I was walking home, I just realized, nukes couldn't exist, could they? Really rigorous.
Yeah, that's just
stuff.
like that.
Yeah, that's just common sense.
I love that one because it's just nice. Like there's nothing bad about it. It's like, there are actually no nukes.
Right.
Yeah.
How cool. Isn't that swell?
What is the advantage in that world for the government to make you believe that nukes are real? Like, what does that do
That's
for
a
them?
very good question, Josh. I don't think anybody ever quite put it all together.
Including these people. Yeah.
Why the government would fake something like that. But horror also exists in this nexus of I'm already saying nexus too much. It's my new Ong's hat. As you know, I love to say Ong's hat.
You are always
We all
saying
do,
this.
yeah.
I remember my days of going to ongshat.cx and seeing a big hat.
What is that
spread
man
wide
doing
open.
with his hat?
So,
He fits so much glass up there.
Lovecraft and Ambrose Bierce and those guys who were making horror novels and short stories from the late 1800s into the early 1900s were always kind of doing things, even if they weren't done as hoaxes, they were done like hoaxes, right? There's a Lovecraft story called The Statement of Randolph Carter, which purports to be a transcript of a testimony of Randolph Carter to the police after his friend Warren disappeared down a big hole.
I'm always disappearing
CX.
down here.
One of the really clever ones, I think, is in The King in Yellow, which does not purport to be a real document of anything. It's set in the future. It's, this was around 1900. It's written novelistically from the first person perspective of multiple people, but it doesn't pretend to be like a journal or anything. But they do keep referencing this play, this very real play that was going around France called The King in Yellow that was making people insane. And of course, the play itself, that is a hoax. There is no King in Yellow play.
Oh, okay.
So this idea of like making things like a hoax, for some reason we like it, right? We like to, the same way as like as a kid, you don't necessarily believe in Santa Claus, but you just want to.
Yeah.
You're like, Santa Claus isn't
Yeah, I
real
wanna
because he's on the
believe.
TV.
Yeah.
So,
It is
whatever.
more fun.
Yeah, I still want to wake
To
up and
play
think that
into
I
it.
got a
Yeah.
present from a German. And
Yeah.
who doesn't want presents from Germans?
Me.
Josh is raising his hand.
Oh, because you're Dutch?
Yeah.
Mostly. I did realize when I was a child, we got to the age maybe 8, 9, where
Yeah.
I started to doubt. Maybe that's a little old, whatever. Started to doubt, like, oh, maybe the Santa guy isn't real. Because my grandparents, a slight side note.
Oh, yeah. This is demented. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so
Here's what we're here
as
for.
long as I can remember, from very young, every Christmas Eve, my grandparents would hire a like Santa and Mrs. Claus like impersonator.
Two people.
Sometimes those actors, their children would come also dressed as elves.
Was it the
basically paid this family, and it was the same couple. His name is Tom, and sometimes he'd show up kind of drunk and like in like one video recording, I could hear my aunt.
I've seen this video.
Be like,
God.
hey, I think you've had enough, Tom. But they would come and like sing jingles or whatever.
Jingle bells,
grew up,
even.
thought it was so normal. But then there was one year, and so then the thing was too, then like they'd come and they'd give Christmas Eve, we each got a present.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
then Tom, Santa, would then give each of us a present. And there was one year that I didn't get one.
Oh.
And I was like, I mean, the man's right here. And he's not giving me a present. And so I was so distraught. And my dad, I think, caught on. He was like, hey, Tom, like, what's going on here? They just dropped it in the driveway. It's got to be Pokemon Yellow.
I think my favorite thing about those videos is that like your aunt, who was a grown-ass woman at this point,
Yeah.
was made to sit in Santa's lap.
Yeah, my whole everyone had to sit in Santa's lap.
Everyone was sitting in Santa's lap.
Everyone sat in Santa's lap.
All right.
And then he asked, what would you like? Okay, a jewelry box? I don't know, here's a scarf.
I have learned so much about you. Oh my God. What?
Yeah.
You're so normal.
Yeah. Hey, oh my God, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brian.
So do you know who these people, like, did you ever have any contact with them after?
No.
Were they
No.
friends of the family?
I
Were they
could
from a
not-
magazine?
I
Did they go
could
to
not
other
tell you.
houses?
I could.
Were they from a magazine?
Yeah, wait.
You get a magazine. It's like, here's your celebrity impersonators. Here's a Santa Claus.
This
I
is Santa's
guess.
Weekly.
Yeah.
I
the
have
Santa
no
magazine.
other clarifying information, context, could not tell
Did
you.
they mail this out of Ong's hat? New Jersey.
He did pull the gifts out of a giant, what I thought was a bag
giant
at the time,
Ong's
but
hat.
looking back now, I do realize it was an Ong's hat. Yeah.
That is
So
Holy shit.
I don't remember what we were talking about. Hoaxes. There we go.
So I never thought Santa Claus was real. I always,
cool.
because I saw him on TV and my parents told me that nothing on TV was real.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, oh, so he's a TV guy.
Yep.
And also like all our presents was like, oh yeah, this is from Mom. This is from Annette.
It never said from Santa too.
No, my parents started doing that like much later, like when I was like a teenager, because they thought it was funny.
I really like the idea of young Brian like keeping a list of TV guys who aren't real. It's like Brian Williams, Ted Turner, Santa Claus.
Not real.
Bill Clinton.
So if you ever saw them in the street, you'd know you had gone insane.
But, home videos are so revealing. Like they're so revealing in like just how peculiar everyone is in their own life. And there is something that's always a little bit scary about them.
Yeah.
You know, you don't necessarily like that's a very vulnerable thing to tell people as an adult. Oh yes, I was visited by Santa Claus like every year of my childhood.
Yeah.
And especially to like have people see that.
Yes. Well, it's weird too, the remembering of certain memories too. It's like, you know, what is the earliest thing I remember? Am I actually remembering that, or am I remembering watching a video of it, or am I remember being told about it? Am I remembering looking at a photo about it? Like, at what point does the memory stop being real?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the interesting thing about tape in general.
Yeah,
it's tape.
It's tape,
right?
God damn it!
When you commit something to that medium, you are committing it in a specific way, and it is so tied to whatever the technology is that was used to record it at this time.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing about Marble Hornets specifically that makes it such an interesting piece to go back to, right?
Yeah,
because
it feels like 2009.
Exactly.
You know, we realize that there is something about the look, especially of analog tape. Of course, Marble Hornets is digital, but like found footage existed. There were found footage movies, at least as far back as the 60s. There, of course, have been fake news broadcasts. And of course, there were fake radio broadcasts and things like the War of the Worlds. But something about videotape really works. And finally, a small group of filmmakers funding a movie entirely on credit card debt. And they even returned that camera to Best Buy after they filmed the Blair Witch Project. They made the Blair Witch Project. And people forget that the Blair Witch Project is actually shot on 2 cameras, right? Part of it is on black and white 16 millimeter film, including the ending. Which is not on the night vision. People remember it as night vision, but it's actually the bright light off of the front of the camera. And of course, the night vision home video camcorder that captures all of the unplanned moments. People remember that image of you're seeing straight up her nostrils as she's crying.
Well, it's on the cover of the poster. And Blair Witch Project was released. Well, originally it got its premiere at Sundance, the Sundance Film Festival, January 23, 1999.
Yep.
Was released to cinemas July 14 of 1999. Budget was, according to Wikipedia, somewhere between $200,000 to $750,000. And according to Box Office Mojo, made $248 million.
Son of a bitch.
We can do it too, guys. We can do it too. It's not too late.
Well, that was the horrible feeling. It's like, anyone could do this now.
Right.
But of course, Blair Witch also ran with a very expensive new kind of advertising where they made a website. They made a second movie. They made a documentary that aired on TV. I think it was on the Sci-Fi Channel, that was all about the kids who went and tried to make this documentary and disappeared in the woods. Everybody else got a fake last name, but unfortunately the main actress used her whole name in that improvised scene where she's talking straight to the camera. And then they were all like listed as missing, presumed dead. Their IMDb page even reflected that. This is the thing about how nothing ever has like one clear beginning. This is taking from Cannibal Holocaust back in like 1980, where the director was like, oh yeah, this is a bunch of film that I found from some people who died in the jungle somewhere. And that one used its fakery by combining actual documentary footage and then also the fake stuff. Blair Witch is, of course, like entirely fake.
Right.
And Marble Hornets, as we're going to see, is also entirely fake. On the internet, too, outside of video, you know, for so long, video was not super viable as a medium to create new things.
Yep.
You know, you had terrible compression. You had to sit and wait for dial-up load times.
I love to download a .rm file and wait for it to buffer in Real Player for 2 hours.
I definitely have like old DivX videos.
Oh, hell yeah.
And like Real Player shit from like forever ago. They're just like bizarre old viral things that no one remembers. like shake that bear.
I did. I'm sorry. And I did want to apologize on the record to you. I want to apologize, Brian, that I let you forget about it for so long.
If you'd
Honestly.
like to learn more about Shake That Bear, check out the most recent episode of Lads Cast, available exclusively for our $10 patrons at patreon.com/worst of all.
Shake That Bear has like no presence online these days. It's just like a thing that we knew about.
Well, we're bringing it back.
then.
We're bringing it back.
After you mentioned it on that Lads Cast, of course, I get a text late that night from Anne that is just 3 emojis. Maracas, an arrow pointing right, and a bear's face.
Yeah.
But before, aside from video, a lot of stuff was coming in through text. And one of the great ones, this is often listed as like the first creepypasta. I think this is a little bit broad of a definition because I think of creepypasta having to be like something that you see on a forum, that like exists on one page. This was a very elaborate thing called Ted the Caver in 2001.
I don't think I'm familiar with this one.
Nope.
Oh,
never heard.
I mean, it really does. Like if you read any of the big no sleep stories, they all owe something to Ted the Caver. And it's just this story of a guy who's looking for a way around to where Floyd Collins died, looking for Mammoth Cave, that area. Forgive me if I get some of this wrong. I haven't reread Ted the Caver. It was hosted on an Angel Fire blog.
Oh, yeah.
You can still find it in that format. And it's got all these little like old as shit JPEGs, like maybe 256 color or something like that. And it's they're real pictures of a cave, real pictures of this guy who wrote the story in the cave. But the story gets weirder and weirder, and he starts to Photoshop certain images, and then he finds these like hieroglyphs deep within the caverns. And then eventually you get to the last post, and it's like, okay, having gathered all this information, all of this stuff, we're blah, blah, blah. I've been scared to go to sleep at night, et cetera, all the kind of the hallmarks. And then, of course, it ends with, I'm going to go back to the cave tomorrow. I'll update you guys when I get back.
But there's no update.
Of course.
Which also, like, it's cool. It's cool for a hoax, but it also kind of sucks for a story.
Sure.
Because it just stops. That's why Lovecraft's protagonists always go insane. And it's like, oh, okay, so they lived through it, so they can tell us what happened, but then they're also getting loopy at the end. With Ted the Caver, there's just no more Ted. No more Ted. And that one led to its own like list of hoaxes where a guy was like, this guy ripped my story off. I actually wrote this in 1989. And he published this PDF that has the full story with an ending, but it gets really stupid. And it's very clear that he just stole Ted the Caver's thing and backdated like his PDF. Yeah. So
he copy pasted.
And you can actually find some of the web forums from 2001, 2002, the very few things that are still up from that time talking about Ted the Caver. I recommend it. It's fun. It's pretty dry, but it is like, it's a fun thing to dig into. And of course, in 2001, when looking at an Angel Fire blog was normal, it must have felt so
Rather
real.
than abnormal.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, it's like, oh, it's this relic.
Yeah,
it's this Angel Fire thing.
I think there's something to be said about the way that interacting with a computer felt back then.
Yeah.
That the actual tactile experience of using a computer was fundamentally different. That we were looking, generally speaking, at CRTs, which allowed for deeper blacks than an LCD allows.
Yeah.
The actual...
That's why Thief and Thief 2 are too dark.
But not on a CRT.
No.
It also just sort of the auditory experience of the computer and hearing the fans spinning up and the buzzing. It's like just a very different sensory and tactile experience that I think for those of us who grew up with that era of computing, we have certain memories attached to it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain, particularly to people I think who, grew up with pocket-based, technology and looking at everything on phones or laptop screens or whatever. It's hard to describe just how it felt. But there was something about that could get you immersed in these worlds in a way that I don't think is possible in the same way now.
And I imagine that was true also with thinking about Ong's Hat, where you're working on much older computers that make much louder sounds.
Yeah.
They're using magnetic storage and things like that.
You can look to some of these examples of like new school text adventures that are available like on Steam. But what they do is they also emulate the feel of an old terminal and they play the sounds and shit like that.
I mean, there is something just so fun about, again, like I said, I didn't believe in Santa Claus, but I kind of wanted to. You know, like when we went to my grandparents' house, it was just fucking white elephant gifts. So it was just like I always got whatever shit my grandpa pulled out of the trash because he was what do they call him? He was a guy who dug around in the garbage after he retired. I don't know what the name for that is, but
dumpster diver.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, he was not Dutch, but he was Dutch at heart.
Sure.
And so we'd always just get shit that he pulled out of dumpsters at Christmas, and there was always like silly white elephant stuff. So like, there's no reason for me to believe in Santa because no one's even like thinking about the gifts that they're giving in that setting. I certainly don't have any aunt paying any drunk middle-aged men to walk around as jolly old Saint Nick.
In case Leanne, you're listening to this, it was my grandfather who did.
Okay. Yeah. This is your aunt who just kept him in line.
Yeah.
And sat in his lap.
We all
That's
had
part of
to. She had no choice.
Can we just upload those videos and then that's what this episode is about?
Yeah,
We're just going to talk about the Santa Claus
You know what's
videos.
interesting about those videos? Again, having seen them myself, they do have a really cursed found footage feel.
Yeah.
Like, they
part
could
of it
be
is the
used.
lighting too. It was it was an older house where it was like there was no ceiling light fixtures in any of the rooms.
Oh, like
So
my
it was-
apartment.
Yeah, much like his apartment. Yeah.
So it was like any sort of
It's
like,
all lamps.
lamps. Yep. So like real warm light, real low light.
And to the point of the tape itself, I think it's Super 8. So like the actual.
I mean, it would have been one of those big old motherfuckers.
Or high
Like
eight,
you have to put it on your fucking shoulder to shoot
Okay,
over.
yeah.
It's huge.
So
huge.
the actual dynamic range is not very impressive. You can't exactly make things out.
Yeah.
Santa is just kind of like a blurry
that kind of like
blob.
Yeah, blends into the kind of like mauve
Biblically
chair that he's
accurate
on.
Santa Claus.
Well, and Marble Hornets, even in some of its later entries, towards in like season 2, has footage from like the 90s or early 2000s. It's more
Alex,
analog. Yeah. There is something to it, and there's something to the image, even on digital tape, that's different when it's not tape, even when it's still digital.
Yes.
When it goes wrong. The image of things going wrong and figuring out what the tools are for all of those that I think Marble Hornets does especially well in season 1.
Yep.
So there were a couple other, after YouTube hits and people are like making videos regularly. In 2007, someone tries an ARG called The Wyoming Incident. There are a couple
On
of
something awful.
really fun little creepy videos, and then it goes completely off the rails in all of the worst ways. It is a monumentally stupid project that started with 3 fantastic videos.
Yeah, I remember I was posting on something awful at the time.
Yeah, Josh is a gooner. Josh is a gooner.
I'm not a gooner. I'm a goon.
No, you're a gooner.
no, you're a
I've
gooner.
seen it.
Not. Ooh, you have?
At Ong's Hat.
Oh, you found my goon cave.
Oh God.
My goon hat.
Yeah, don't
My
touch it.
giant hat that I
Don't
goon
touch
in.
it.
Ong's cave? Is this anything?
Hard.
It can be, yeah. If we try
it
hard
will
enough.
be. It will be.
Oh, poor AJ. We're starting so many bits without him.
We're gonna bring AJ back next week and be like, so AJ's come back from Ong's hat.
Hey there, you are listening to a preview of a premium episode of The Worst of All Possible Worlds. If you'd like to listen to the rest of this, head on over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/worstofall. And you can listen to not only the rest of this episode, but our entire backlog of premium episodes, bonus episodes, and if you subscribe at the $10 tier, you will get an extra episode of the podcast every single month. Again, that is patreon.com/worstofall. Hope to see you there.